Hello and welcome to tonight's discussion about how best to support someone with cancer. Before I get into tonight, I've got a whole swag of things that I've prepared that I really want to resource you with. I guess I'd like to, and it's great that we've got an intimate group tonight. I'd like to get a handle on from what perspective are you most interested? Are you most interested in being the support person, or are you most interested in coming from the space of the cancer consumer, if you like?
For me, it's support.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Maria. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, more as a consumer, I guess.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
well,
so.
make sure that I cover both sides of the equation, because as you both know, like cancer's, it's everywhere. It's one of those things that when you say the word, I mean, the first time I was diagnosed with cancer was back in 1991. And in those days, you very rarely heard it. And if you did hear it, there was an automatic assumption that, you know, cancer automatically meant death. But thankfully, you know, the treatments and approaches to cancer have evolved, and there are many options available to people now with experiencing cancer. And Anthony, you're here from the capacity of support person. Yeah. And so for those of you who haven't met Anthony before, I met Anthony, gosh, how many years ago was that now? Okay, you're on mute. So we might take you off mute.
Yep, 2014.
Unbelievable. His little boy was diagnosed with blood cancer. And I met Little A through Childhood Cancer Support, and I'm an ambassador for them. And so they've been through a lot over the years, and thankfully Anthony was able to ring the bell with remission a couple of years ago now. And I haven't seen him, but apparently he's about as tall as me, so I'm not looking forward to seeing that. So tonight I'm really wanting to go through some really practical strategies around what goes on for the person who's being diagnosed, what goes on for the support person, having been on both sides of that equation myself. So I've had cancer twice. First one was thyroid, the second one was brain tumor. Going through a few tests at the moment for some other things that they've discovered. And so it's interesting how over time our approach to these things change. And so the first time when I was diagnosed, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was young and naive enough to not make the assumptions that some people can make when they hear a word that's a bit frightening. And so I asked a lot of questions, and I was more curious than fatalistic about what I thought I knew about this thing called cancer. Whereas now I'm noticing that when things get discovered, I'm open-minded, I'm very curious, and then I go out and do my own research. I'm quite resourceful. And I think that's the way, and welcome Marty, and I'll get Marty to share some of his experience as well, because I met Marty, oh gosh, a long time ago. And during that time, Marty was diagnosed with neck cancer, and he heads up the head and neck cancer support group here in Brisbane. And he's also on some global groups around that as well. And so I asked Marty to come along again as well, because he's full of loads of different resources and tips and strategies that he personally has used and people in his support group has used. So I thought that the more I can resource you with tonight, the better. So what I'd like to do, rather than charge into my list, and I'm going to give you all of this, right? I want to know, is there anything specific that you want to get out of this session so that I can make sure that we resource you with what you need tonight? So you can either come, because we're not so big tonight, which is great, you can either come off mute and articulate it in words, or if you like, you can just pop it into the chat box, whatever you're more comfortable doing. What specifically would you like to get out of this session this evening? Maria?
I think for me, it's just because I don't know too much about cancer. I just know of family and friends who's had it. And it's just how can I better support or kind of, be respectful?
Yes.
Because, yes.
Yeah, that's really good. Like what to do, what not to do, what to say.
Yes.
Say that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Maria. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I guess I've experienced cancer myself 14 years ago, but just also how survivorship impacts your life after cancer. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about, that you are a changed person and your choices are changed. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good point. No one actually talks about that. I'm definitely going to talk to that. Thank you. How about you, Anthony? What brings you along tonight?
I really wanted to hear your experiences about how you dealt with this yourself when you got your diagnosis, right? Because like you said, we had little Anthony, but I mean, he was 6 at the time and he can't really articulate how he felt. He doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the chances are that I'm going to have someone else in my life that gets diagnosed with cancer at some point.
Yeah.
Or maybe I may get diagnosed with cancer at some point.
Yeah.
So to get more information for me going forward for when I do come across it again.
All right.
Deal with it and handle it.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. All right. And I'm going to draw from you, Marty, because we've both been there as well. And I guess the first thing that I want to say is that when the word cancer gets brought up, it elicits a fairly strong reaction from most people, because just like the word change, most people think that when there's a change, you're going to have to lose something or give up something. When people hear the word cancer, immediately there's an automatic association with it to threat. And so the brain has two, this is like a little subsection of the brain. This is the front part of the brain, which is called our prefrontal cortex. And the middle part of the brain, which is the emotional center, the limbic system. Now, they're the two big gears of the brain. When we're feeling in control and in charge and directing our lives, we're always at the front. We're at the driver's seat and we're focusing forward on what we want, right? When something happens that happens very suddenly that we're unprepared for, something like cancer, automatically the brain will default to the emotional center of the brain, which is threat. So it will automatically associate this shocking surprise with an association of threat. And when it goes into threat, a lot of those fierce emotions, strong emotions can come up because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of feeling out of control and unsure about what it actually means. So the brain naturally, if it's uncertain, it goes into threat until proven otherwise, right? So its default system is always to assume that anything that was unanticipated is a threat until proven otherwise. And so what we need to do is, and as adults, it takes a lot more effort, right? Whereas as children, believe it or not, they are far more adaptive and they bounce forward with greater resilience because they don't have so much history of life and programming of life to inform their life experience. It's like one of the little boys there, Devlin, he had his foot from the knee down amputated. And I remember I talked to his mother and he came out of surgery. They weren't certain how much of his leg was going to be amputated. And when he woke up, he looked down at his leg, he looked at his mum and he goes, "Mama." She said, "Yes, son." He said, "The cancer's gone." Right? Now, you and I, as adults, would have probably gone, "The effing leg's gone," right? But he was like, the cancer's gone. And all of a sudden, he just went, "Oh, I can't walk on 2 legs. I can hop and I've got a prosthetic leg now and I can still run." And so his little brain was like, what can I do and what am I still able to do? Whereas for adults, what we do, we have this frame of reference of experience, and we start to linger longer on those things that are no longer able for us to do. So we're like, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this. Well, hang on, stop. What can you do? You know? Marty, is there something you would add to that?
Yeah, I guess, and I've just come from a head and neck cancer support group video conference. So we've all been talking about Hear My Voice. We've all been talking about speech therapy tonight. But what Josie's saying is right, because I remember when I was told I had squamous cell carcinoma with an occult primary, I've gone, what's that? They didn't say anything, pass me on, come back and see me next week and we'll have a discussion about it. I've gone home and gone into Google, put in squamous cell carcinoma, but that's skin cancer. I've had skin cancers all my life, grew up on the beach. But the thing is, I remember someone saying head and neck cancer. I looked that up. It freaked me out. So I've gone back to the meeting, and this is where they come back and they tell you everything. So I've gone into the radiation oncologist, and she says, okay, so you've got squamous cell carcinoma with an occult primary. What we're going to do is and I'm sitting there going, yeah, okay, whatever. And then she said, but we're going to take out 8 teeth. I freaked out. I must have gone grey, because she was going to pick up the phone to make the appointments for all the radiation and put the phone back down and said, are you okay? The first time she'd shown any empathy, but that's another story. But the thing is, as you go through this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Josie, but I think you start to adjust. And the best advice I had through the whole thing was, don't get too far ahead of the game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just don't worry about the what ifs, because they may not happen. And then you've used all that energy to go somewhere where you didn't go. Yeah. And then the final one was just take one day at a time. Yeah. I mean, I had 36 days of radiation every day for 36 days. And I had 3 weeks or 3 weekly rounds of chemotherapy. I lost 26 kilos in 6 weeks. You accept it and you go on. Now, the fact that they didn't find the primary was interesting, because that made me really worried.
The thing that you did, Marty, and during that time, I was actually coaching Marty at the time when he was actually diagnosed. And so to his credit, one of the things that a lot of people do when they get diagnosed, they freak out, then they want to isolate. They want to withdraw and not, associate with people. Because 1, you don't want to talk about it all the time. 2, you don't want to rehash the detail all the time. 3, you don't want 5 million questions from people that you can't even answer. And because your state of arousal is already high, you're going to pick up on everybody else's state of arousal. So as a parent with a child going through it, you try to stay calm and reassure the child, right? When you're the adult going through something like this, and you may not have a parent, and even if you did have parents around, they're naturally going to freak out as well, because they don't want you to die, right? But your narrative in your mind, you're going to have one of two thoughts. You're either going to have, I don't want to die, or like Marty and I want to live. Now, they sound like the same thing, but they're very, very, very different. So please note this. When something like a diagnosis gets given to you, it's normal, natural human to feel freaked out. It's normal, natural human to feel frightened and to feel fear. The idea is to acknowledge, I'm feeling scared. And once you acknowledge it, you're not saying, so there's a difference between acknowledging the emotion and ruminating on it. So if I acknowledge the emotion, all of a sudden what it does in my brain, it's normal, natural human for the emotional part of my brain to go, holy crap, this is a major unexpected diversion in your life. and you're going to go into fight, flight, freeze. That's normal. But you don't necessarily have to live there or stay there. Emotions and feelings are visitors. They are not permanent residents. They are only permanent if you keep focusing on them. The idea, the way to disempower those big, strong, negative emotions is essentially to acknowledge them. Because once you acknowledge them, this part of the brain has to engage to name them. And so when you say, I'm feeling scared, all of a sudden the emotion goes from having a handle, a stronghold on your physique, to all of a sudden going, oh, thank goodness she knows I'm here, right? And you're keeping it real. So if you want real, you've got to keep it real. So if you're a supporter or a carer of someone with cancer, the first thing you don't want to do is to say things like, how are you going? How are you feeling? Are you okay? Because if you're going to get an honest answer, you're not going to like it. Because the honest answer would be, actually, this is pretty effed up and I'm not okay. Actually, I'm scared, right? That's going to make that person feel worse. And you're not really going to enjoy hearing that either, because sometimes people aren't really prepared or resourced to handle that kind of direct information. So, you know, like one of my best friends passed away in November. She was diagnosed with cancer in September last year. So it was a pretty swift, aggressive cancer. And I was in there at hospital beside her pretty much every day. And I remember the first time I walked in there, I think it was her daughter that was in there at the time. And, you know, there was a few tears and feeling really sad and whatever. And I walked in there and because I've been there before and I know this woman really well, I said, wow, this is pretty effed up. What the hell are you doing here? You know, we both had a bit of a giggle about it. And I went, okay, so this is a bit of a surprise, isn't it? You know, she's like, yeah. And I went, are you freaked out? She goes, yep, I'm freaked out. And I was helping her name what she was feeling. And I'm like, righto, how do you want me to be right now? I just want you to sit here and hold my hand. And that's what she wanted. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to hypothesize. She just wanted me to be there. And please don't minimize the fact that silence is, your presence is more than some words at times can offer. You know, I think the thing for a cancer patient, and I'll ask you, Marty, to add to this, you just want real. People change. The second that you're diagnosed with cancer, your world's different. But also the world of the people around you is different too, because you're no longer the person without cancer. You're now the person with this thing called cancer. And because it's there, they don't want to ask about it. They want to talk to you, but it's like, how do I talk to you and respect this thing at the same time without upsetting you or saying the wrong thing, you know, or getting it wrong, or somehow making an assumption, trying to fix you, trying to solve something for you, when that may actually not be what you need. Is that what your experience was, Marty?
Yeah, it was really funny because I was working, as you know, in a pretty wild sort of industry, and they gave me 6 months off work when I was diagnosed. But I didn't want to be detached from work, so I used to go and see all these people that I work with, and we just have normal conversations. I went to a Christmas party, and I'd just come out of treatment. I couldn't eat, I couldn't swallow, but we went to the club in town here. They all had their beautiful gourmet meals, and I had a glass of Ensure, which is like a little milkshake, and and I had it in a champagne glass. But that's all I could eat.
Yeah.
But for everybody and for myself, it was really great to be with them, because they were really good friends.
Yeah.
And I guess in another way I was lucky too, because I didn't have a partner at the time. All I had were my sisters, and they were all nurses. So when they came to stay for a week, I was okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the attitude that I had, was, we'll get through this. It's not a problem. Whatever happens.
I think it's important too that there's a distinction between being optimistic like genuinely optimistic versus false hope. So what I really did not appreciate was when I did go back to work, you know, I could feel and sense other people's trepidation and fear. It's almost like I became really sensitive to fear because I knew firsthand what it was like to be in that threatened state of, all right, they gave me a piece of paper that said 6 months to live. Now, I happen to not believe that. But if I had believed it, then that would have been an entirely different story. But I remember at the time I was working in accounting and, you know, all about numbers and facts. And so when the doctor said, you know, you've got 6 months, I looked at that piece of paper and I looked at him and I said, how do you know that for sure? And his answer for me wasn't complete. So I took the gap in the game. And so going back to what I said before is that there's two types of thinking: focusing on what you don't want to have happen and focusing on what you do want. Now, to focus on what you don't want is normal, natural, human. It's absolutely natural to be thinking, I don't want to die. But when you think on not dying, so if this is the thought, I don't want to die, and this is the thought, I want to live, right? They're two different things. But if I focus on not dying, what am I not focusing on? Right? Wanting to live. And if that's the only thing you get out of tonight, I'm really happy, right? So thinking about not dying is a normal reaction, right? But by thinking of not dying, you're not focusing on living, which is an entirely different gear. When you're focusing on what you don't want, you're focusing with your emotional brain and you're looking like that. You're looking behind you, freaking out and focusing on the very thing you don't want. Therefore, amplifying the conditions and the chemistry within your body, right, to attract the very outcome you don't want. So if that's how you get what you don't want, how do you get what you do want? Well, you've got to refocus your attention forward towards what you do want. So every time your brain freaks you out and says, I'm scared, I don't want to die, you need to hold yourself and you need to say, okay, buddy, I hear you. If that's what you don't want, what is it that you do want? And automatically your brain will go, well, I want to live. Now, all of a sudden, when you start focusing on that, everything changes. The biochemistry in your body changes, right? Your sense of resourcefulness changes. The way you think changes. The way you feel changes. Your options become greater when you start focusing that way. So I want you to even just try it on for yourself. Like, imagine yourself saying, I don't want to die. And notice what happens to your energy. Does it contract or does it expand? Thumbs down for contraction, thumbs up for expansion. Tell me, show me, right? Whereas when you say, I want to live, what happens? Straight away, there's this upliftment of energy, right? You need to follow that upward shift, right? So when you focus on you want to live, all of a sudden, the way you approach what you're focusing on is different than the freak out mode of when you're in that fight, flight, freeze. Okay, you can't even think straight when you're focusing on that. But it's normal to have those thoughts, and you have choice to refocus attention towards what you want. So when those thoughts come up, you just refocus, 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 and use a journal. The other thing that I want to say is that when something like this comes up, you go through a whole lot of stages. So like last week, my mother was rushed to hospital and, you know, all of us were in a heightened state of what the brain scientists would call arousal. But, you know, it's another word for fear, right? We're all freaking out. So when you look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, you know, stages of grief, she talks about the first one is shock, where you have that initial paralysis from hearing a diagnosis or news, right? That's normal. Then you go into the next stage, which is denial, where you go, oh, I can't believe this is happening. This isn't really happening, surely. Then you go into anger, where you get really mad and you go, sure, this can't be happening to me. That can't be happening to that person. This isn't right. Then you go into bargaining. So depending on your faith, you might go, look, I'll do you a deal. If I make all these changes, just give me another chance, right? You probably sounds familiar to some of you, yeah? Or, you know, with my mum, going through it, fell to my knees and I started praying and said, please, you know, give her another chance, you know, what can we do? What can I do to give her another chance? I'm not ready for her to go, you know. I was trying to get into that bargaining stage. It was interesting to watch. And then they talk about the stage of depression where you finally realize the inevitability of what's going on. This is actually happening. You start to acknowledge the reality of it. Then you go through what's called testing, where you seek realistic solutions. You start doing your investigations and you start deciding on the approach that's right for you. And then finally, and hopefully this doesn't take too long, but oftentimes it can take a while, you get to a point of acceptance. And I want to talk about the word acceptance because sometimes it can be very gravely misunderstood. Just because you've been diagnosed with something, we then make up a narrative about what it means. In your mind, you will make up a story about what that diagnosis means to you. Now, depending on that narrative, you will either become resourceful and go, okay, this is really happening. What am I going to do about it? Or you can go into like a helpless space where you start to suffer because you argue with reality. You go, no, this isn't real. This isn't happening to me. Surely no, you know. And the more you resist it, the more you will suffer. Our suffering occurs every time we go into argument with reality. So what I'm not saying is that when you accept it, you're surrendering to the diagnosis. What I'm saying is when you accept it, you surrender the argument. You surrender the resistance. And when you surrender the resistance, you stop suffering. Marty, is there something you would add to that?
It's like, I've always looked at the Kubler-Ross curve as we have to go through it, but it's not linear and it's not timely.
Mm.
We can go backwards and forwards, but we still get there.
Yeah.
It's what our intention is that's the most important thing as far as I can see.
Mm.
If you set a really good intention, you're right.
So the other thing that about acceptance is to realize a lot of people think if I accept it, I'm resigning somehow. I may as well just roll over and, you know, accept that this is going to kill me. Well, actually, it doesn't mean that at all. And there was a lady that I was coaching in 2014. She was diagnosed with very aggressive stomach cancer. And the doctors had given her 8 weeks to live. Now, she came to me, we had some conversations, we did a whole lot of inner work, right? She lived another 18 months, but in that 18 months, they were probably the best in her life. She had 2 young kids, they went overseas, they say that the meaning of life is to find purpose for your life. And sometimes a diagnosis like cancer can actually bring a heightened state of purpose and meaning to your life. Did you find that, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. There's still a work in progress, I think. You know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But you start to take less for granted, those things that you took for granted before, and you start to see even the things around you. You need to start tuning in and go, look at all the things that I can be grateful for. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of stuff now that I want to take it in both angles. I want to give specific resources to the cancer patient, and I want to give specific resources to the person who's providing support. There is So what we said before is, what you don't say is things like, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Can I give you my opinion? You don't say any of that. So what you do say, you can ask something like, you know, how are you doing? Because it's not the feeling space. You can say, you know, what do you need? You can also just allow your presence to be a gift to that person and only offer an opinion if it's asked for. And that takes a lot of discipline to be able to hold that back. You know, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? The other thing that I learned pretty early on, I do a lot of work with cancer and leukemia patients, and I've sat beside many people when they've taken their last breath. And there was one man in particular, Mark, who was actually a good friend, and everyone was like, oh, you know, he was diagnosed very suddenly. And one night when everyone else went home, I was sitting beside him and he reached out for my hand. And so I held his hand and I looked at him. I said, what's up? And he said, I'm tired. I'm tired. And I looked at him and I went, is this part of your exit strategy? Have you had enough? He said, yep, I don't want to fight. I said, okay, don't fight. I said, just let go, stop fighting. You know, and he started crying and he said, you can't imagine the relief I feel hearing you say that. I've been fighting because everybody else doesn't want me to die, and they keep coming in here saying, I don't want you to die. And I feel guilty. This is a dying man in the hospital bed. I feel guilty for thinking to myself that I don't want to be here. I've had enough. I'm tired because of them. But if I think for myself, then I'm okay actually with where I'm at. And I think as a support person of people that have died, one of the assumptions that I realize is that not everybody wants to live. You know, and if I can support someone to have a good and graceful death, then I'm doing good for that person. And I've helped many families come to peace and repair, you know, resentments and things that they've had between them at the deathbed, you know, so that the person can leave with peace and the people can say goodbye with a sense of peace in their hearts, you know. So at the end of the day, you know, the cancer patient wants to keep it real. And the only way that the cancer patient can keep it real is that if you keep it real with your conversation. You know, if you don't know what to say, you're better off saying, I have no clue what to say right now, right? I just want to be here for you. So whatever way you need me to be, I want to be here to support you in whatever way you need, right? I'm lost for words. I don't know what to say. Just keep it real. They'll tell you, right? The other thing is what not to do is don't rescue and don't fix them. Instead, ask them what they want. You know, can I get you anything? Instead of inundating them with 5 million questions. Where are you at? What's the latest? What's going on? How, you know, what are they doing? And sending text messages and all these emails, which is just more stress and more pressure for the cancer patient. What you're better off doing is attend to the tangible needs. So is there a meal that you can provide? Is there some laundry you can do? Is there some errands that you can run for them? You know, just keep it practical. Tips for the supporter, right? I'll go there first. The first thing I would say is you have to take care of yourself and your own needs, because if you're not looking after you, you're not really going to be doing the best for the person who's unwell. So you need to make time to unplug from everybody else's needs and make sure that you're spending at least half a day looking after yourself, right? That's really, really important. And self-care really means knowing where your boundaries are and knowing that you can also offer other options to the person with cancer for support. So whether that's a support group, whether it's a therapist, whether it's an online reference, like the Truth About Cancer series. And there's a brilliant website called thetruthaboutcancer.com with some really great interviews, articles, resources that you can point people to. The second thing I would say to the carer is listen. So sometimes it's best to give no words and no advice, and just to deeply, deeply listen. And don't be afraid of silence. It's a gift. The third thing I would say to a support person is definitely accept wherever the person is on their cancer journey. So don't try, like I was saying before, don't try to fix them or persuade them to your way of thinking or your way of treating where they're at right now. Just be present for them the way they need you to be there. And let go of any expectations or judgments that you may have about how they should go about it. And then the fourth one I would say is what I mentioned before, is focus on the tangible things that you can handle. So the practical things that they need help, physical help with, and be prepared for the intangible. So whilst you might be helping them with these mundane things that actually takes a bit of stress off their load, they might then feel a need to talk about deeper things with you. So just know that you probably need to make a decision beforehand whether you actually want to be there for them in that way if the opportunity comes up. So you need to be clear about your own boundaries as a carer. And the thing to remember is that the journey itself can be very, very draining, physically and emotionally. So you need to be willing to honor what you can and also what you cannot do. So especially if someone is very close to you that's dealing with the cancer, you have to be sure to take the time for yourself and to reach out to others both online and in person so that you get the support you need. So, you know, even the support person needs support during the process. So that's probably what I'd say about the support person. With the cancer patient, so these are some tips I remember writing when I was going through the process myself, and I thought, okay, how am I going to keep on top of this? And what I did notice is that I needed to keep a check on my mental state and what I was thinking about, because whenever I felt a different pain in my body, my brain naturally would say, oh my God, is that cancer too? Right? It just, because you already had this shock that you're dealing with, any other new sensation was automatically going to be assessed as, oh my God, it's another cancer, you know. So you've got to realize that it's normal and human for your brain to go into that cycle, but it's irrational, all right? And it's not necessarily accurate. So it's important that you've really got to keep a handle on your mental focus. So every time, you know, something hurts and you go, oh, is that cancer? You need to be able to go, yeah, but it might not be. You know, I don't know that for sure. So just chuck that in. But here's the 7 things that I wrote down that really helped myself. The first one is surround yourself with people that are good for you. People that will help you laugh. People that will, you know, have upward energy, right? One of the things that I did, you know, they talk about boundaries and there's things that you've just got to stop doing. There's also people you've got to stop being around. There are people that, you know, they're called energy vampires. Every time you're around them, you feel sucked and drained, right? You can't be around people like that when you're going through a survival process. You've got to be around people that resource and uplift you. But unfortunately, some of these people could be family members. So you need a way of having very healthy boundaries to limit the amount of time that you're around those people. And it's absolutely okay to do that, all right? So, you know, a nice respectful way to do that is that there's one friend that I have that every time we come together, she's just draining me, saying the same stuff all the time. And so what I would say, if I knew she was calling me or dropping in, I would say, okay, I've got half an hour. What do you want to do? So I always put a limit around it. And then when that time's up, it's like, righto, I've got to go. And so that's one way of containing it, so that I kept my limits, because I just couldn't do any more than that. And it's okay for you to do that. It's okay for you to say no, by the way. The second thing I wrote down is schedule a minimum of 30 minutes a day just for you to recharge and do something you love. So one of the things that I absolutely love, and Maria knows this, is nature. We've done some walks in Roma Street Parklands, you know, like literally go and sit under a tree, you know, sit around nature and just look around, breathe it in. Because what we get when we're in nature, a lot of these trees release a chemical called photoncides. And photoncides actually has been proven to calm down the parasympathetic nervous system and drop our anxiety levels and create much greater levels of calm, and drops our inflammation in our body as well. And one thing I know that I've done a lot of research around is that all disease comes from inflammation in the body. So if you can do anything to drop that inflammation, that's your gut health, and putting your bare feet on the grass every day and being in nature every day for half an hour, you're doing yourself a huge service to dropping your inflammation in a very natural and sustainable way. So that's something I do every day. If it's not at the parklands, it's just in my backyard, right? I just take my shoes off, make myself a cup of tea, go and sit outside and just enjoy being out there. And that's something I would really recommend to you. The other thing I wrote down is when you experience fear, anger, or doubt, acknowledge those emotions as visitors to your mind, but not permanent residents, right? So when any of those negative emotions come in, they're normal. Acknowledge that they're there, but they're only visitors. They're not there permanently. So sometimes if you entertain your visitor, notice how it stays around a little longer. It likes to be entertained. What you want to do is acknowledge it and then refocus attention, right? So if I don't want to feel fearful, I've got to say, okay, I'm feeling fearful right now. I want to feel, what is it that I want to feel? My go-to emotion is calm. And the reason I say calm is that when you are calm, you have clarity of mind. And when you have clarity of mind, you can see your choices more clearly, right? If you go happy, if you go from fear to happy, that can be a really big stretch. And the brain sometimes goes, no deal. I don't know how to do that right now. Not from this extreme, right? But calm is usually a place that the brain goes, yeah, okay, I like that. That's a good first step. And if you can cultivate calm, you can then get the clarity, and then you can have the confidence to make wise decisions. Never, ever, ever make decisions in a fearful state. The quickest way to create calm, and try this with me now, is take a normal breath in through your nose and then exhale through the mouth as if you're blowing out of a straw. Let's do that again. Breathe in through the nose and then purse the lips like a straw. Notice how the exhalation goes on and on and on and on and on and on. It goes longer. So the idea is have a normal in-breath, but make the out-breath as long as possible. And what that does is it actually calms down your nervous system. And if you do 2 minutes of that, I guarantee you your blood pressure and your heart rate will return to normal. All right. So shorten the in-breath and then as long as possible, right? If you need to motivate yourself to do something and you need to energize yourself, you want to take really big, long in-breaths and shorten the out-breath. But when you're trying to calm down your system, it's a short in-breath and a nice long out-breath. All right. Another thing that can help is to do something that's called havening. And havening is a way of calming down your nervous system as well. So on our hands, we have 144,000 energy points. So the idea is you activate your energy points. And there's a number of ways you can use havening. One way you can do it, you can try it with me now, rub your hands together. If you're really freaking out, then you put your palms on your forehead and you just slowly stroke your face down, feeling every single part of your face with your fingers, nice and slow, all the way down. How good's that? Right? Do it again, love. I love it. It just feels so relaxing and it really helps you go to sleep as well. So put your palms up on the top of your forehead and then slowly stroke all the way down your face. And you notice that your out-breath starts to relax as you bring your hands down your face as well. Right. Another way of using havening is, well, there's so many ways that you can use havening, but once you've charged your hands, you can put one hand on your heart, put the other hand on top, and what happens is the scientific word is coherence. So what happens is the heart that's beating crazily because you're panicked or freaking out, all of a sudden tunes into the energy centers that have been activated in the hands. And actually, without you even doing anything, you start to breathe differently. Your heart starts to feel like the presence of support, right? And it feels assured and it feels attended to. And all of a sudden you start to calm down as well. So that's another little technique that could be useful. The other thing as well is obviously meditation. And that's something that I can't stress enough. A lot of people say, I don't know how to meditate. My mind is crazy. You know, they think they've got to go and sit on a mountain for an hour and in some uncomfortable position with yoga pants. You don't have to do any of that. You can just set your timer for 5 minutes, right? And you do whatever form of mindfulness practice works for you. So if it's lying on the grass with your eyes closed and your hands like that and just breathing and doing nothing else, that's a beautiful way of doing it. Just 5 minutes every day, right, has a cumulative effect. Do something that works for you. Another way for me is drumming. I love drumming. And when I'm in drumming land, I leave the planet. I don't care who's around. I just, I go somewhere dancing, same thing. It doesn't have to be something that you're still at. You don't have to be sitting down. You don't have to be, in this mindless state. You just literally need to be doing something that you lose all track of time, that really helps you feel calm and fully present. So whatever works for you. And remember that on Mondays, I have a free mindfulness session every Monday at lunchtime at 12 o'clock that anyone can come to as often as you want every single Monday. So make sure I'll put that in the chat box now in case you don't know about it. Hopefully you do know about it. You can join me for that every Monday at 12 o'clock for 15 minutes. Right, the next thing that I wrote down here is take every chance you can to read a good book or to watch an inspirational video or to go and watch a movie or to spend time with someone that makes you feel good. So whenever you're starting to feel anxious or freaked out, you need to have immediate resources available to you that can help you shift out of that zone. So even if when you're in a clear-minded space, make a list of things that uplift you, right? So that when you hit the panic button, you've got that list available to you and go, what do I feel like doing now that could really help me and resource me right now, right? One thing that actually really does help, and try this now, is look up and smile. So look up and smile. Put a big smiley face on your face. Show your teeth. Now, without changing anything, be depressed. Keep looking up and smiling and be depressed. Can you do it? No, you can't. Come back down, right? There's a tip for you. So when you're feeling one of these days where you're really challenged, look up and smile. What happens is when you look up and smile, your eyebrows shoot up and you get a tiny burst of a hormone called dopamine into your prefrontal cortex. What that does, it doesn't solve all your problems, but it shifts your mood, even just a little bit. And some days that's all you need to get out of your funk and get into that front seat instead of the back seat of your car, right? All right, the next thing I wrote down is be appreciative of what you've done in your life and remember your strengths. Gratitude is an attitude. So every day, get grateful. So the thing that I realized when I was 24 and the world had given up on me, the doctor said I had 6 months. My family got the priest in who gave me my final rites without my permission. And I got really angry. I was like, get away from here. What are you doing? And he said, I'm giving you your final rites. I said, why? He said, because you're dying. I said, but so are you. You know, he didn't really like that. But anyway, but the thing was, I was like, why is everyone giving up on me? I'm not ready to die. And I got resourceful. I focused on living. I bought every book I could about cancer. How do people get it? How do people recover? How do you conquer cancer? Why did I get it? I just wanted to understand the nature of it. This is way before Google. And what I realized is that when I started focusing on what I wanted, I was much more resourceful. I realized I needed to change my diet. I needed to change my belief systems. I needed to change the way I think and speak, who I hung around with, you know, everything. I changed everything. I moved from Melbourne to Brisbane for the sun because I feel happy in the sun. When I see the sun, I smile and it makes a difference to my mood. And science has backed that up now. There are people that like the sun and the heat, and there are people that love the cold and the cool. And it's like, knock yourself out. Do what makes you feel good. And so every morning when I wake up in the morning, I know that every day is a gift. I no longer take life for granted. So every time I open my eyes, I say thank you. And I smile. And every night when I go to bed, I say thank you for my day. And I think about the things that happened during the day that were really good. And it puts you in a really nice state of mind to be able to drift into sleep. And then you can try some of the havening stuff, right? So with the havening, you do the face. You can also stroke your arms down. And that's another really, really powerful way to calm yourself down, your nervous system. If you have trouble going to sleep, a wonderful way of doing it, there's 2 things I'm going to recommend. One is to get my simple meditation for busy people, because 4 minutes in my voice will put you to sleep without a doubt. And 2 is to actually, when you're breathing in and out, is to actually say it to yourself. Don't say it out loud, especially if there's someone sleeping beside you, is to say, now I'm breathing in, now I'm breathing out. Now I'm breathing in, now I'm breathing out. And I guarantee you, after about 2 minutes, your brain's going to go, oh my God, I'm so bored, and it'll go to sleep. Seriously, it works. So try that as well. And the other thing that I wrote down, and this, to be honest, has been one of the things that has helped me the most, is take time to help and support other people. It's amazing how this can help to heal and make you feel better about yourself and build resilience, because you stop focusing on you and what's going on for you, and you focus on other people, and all of a sudden you feel good because you're helping someone else, and they feel even better because you've helped them. So, you know, stop focusing on your stuff and start to focus on someone else that's less fortunate than you, and there's plenty out there. It really helps to build your sense of gratitude and your resilience as well. People will either choose one of 2 paths. They will either get bitter or they will get better. And sometimes people will get bitter before they get better. because they're going through that whole grief cycle and they haven't quite got to that sense of acceptance, because not only has their reality changed, but maybe physically they've changed as well, you know, and their social and relationships have probably changed as well. So you're not exactly the same. On the outside, you might look the same, but on the inside, nothing's the same, because you're not the person you were before cancer. You are an entirely different person. And so sometimes people can have trouble relating to that. And sometimes you can have trouble kind of coming to terms with this new reality. So it's important to also realize that you've probably felt this, Steve. When people around me die of cancer, I get pretty down. And it's not because of just the sadness and the grieving and the sorrow and the loss. It's because I feel guilty that I'm still alive. Right? It's called survivor's guilt. And it's very, very real, especially when, you know, people are dying of lesser cancers. And it's like, why am I still here? You know, why couldn't he take me instead of that little kid? You know, like you really go into that whole, but then I look at it and go, Josie, become a force for good. If you've learned something or you've discovered something, don't keep it to yourself. Go and help other people with it. Offer it to others. And that's why I decided to do tonight's session, because over the years, I get asked so many times to have one-on-one conversations. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to put it out there. I'm really grateful that you were able to be here. And I hope it's been helpful for you. The other thing I want to say is that, and Steve, you'll be able to relate to this, and Anthony, you'll be able to relate to this in your own, you know, situation, is you are not your condition. You are not your cancer. You know, you're so much more than, you know, a cancer, someone with cancer. You know, there's so much more to you. And sometimes you need to remember that. You need to remember your strengths. You need to remember who you are. You need to remember what you're passionate about and not abandon all of that. Your cancer does not define you, right? It actually builds your character, and it makes you a lot more conscious in terms of how you go and lead your life. And Anthony, you've been through your own program and you're much more mindful now. You know, you're much more vigilant about your choices, and, you know, you're very committed to your path, and you've got to stay true to that. It'd be very easy to slip off, you know that, right? But the idea is you make a commitment, and this is a distinction between having a choice and making a decision. We have many choices in our lives. And when you think something's a choice, you're going to come and go with it. You're going to sit on the fence sometimes. But once you decide on a course of action, you just draw a line in the sand and you go for it. There's no compromising a decision. But if it's a choice, you will. But once you say, I've decided to be well, I've decided to live a good life, I've decided to do good in the world, where's the self-doubt, right? Where's the compromise? There is none. You become unshakable. You will have occasions where your mind gives you those, you know, those scary thoughts, but that's just your brain. It's not you. And your brain's getting freaked out. You just need to go, yep, I am aware of that. And this is what I am. This is what I'm doing. Let's go there. All right. So there's a couple of resources I've given you. So /PP's purposeful pause. So that's the Monday meditations. /fear is the fear chapter. So you can download that for free as well. The other thing, if you go onto my website and under free stuff, there's a whole lot of articles. There's a couple of cancer-based articles that I've written over the years. There's also some, the simple meditation for busy people. If you think that your brain has gotten into habits that have been really hard to break, there is a course that I do have on there called You Are Not Your Brain. And it's basically the 4-step method for breaking bad habits, ending unhealthy thinking, and taking charge of your life. And that's a course that I run with Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. He's a neuroscientist and he's quite world famous on OCD. And so if we need to break patterns, that program is amazing. There's a free video that you can watch on that as well. Now, the other thing that I would like to share with you is a little story, and I don't know if you've heard it before, and I think this is a nice way to kind of wrap up the evening. It's called The Carrot, the Egg, and the Coffee Beans. So let me read this to you. So a young woman went to her mother and told her about her life and how things were so hard for her. She did not know how she was going to make it, and she wanted to give up. She was tired of fighting and struggling. It seemed as one problem was solved, a new one arose. Her mother took her to the kitchen. She filled up 3 pots with water. In the first, she placed carrots. In the second, she placed eggs. And in the last one, she placed ground coffee beans. She let them sit and boil without saying a word, and in about 20 minutes, she turned off the burners. She fished the carrots out and placed them in a bowl. She pulled the eggs out and placed them in a bowl. Then she ladled the coffee into a bowl. Turning to her daughter, she asked, "Tell me what you see." "Carrots, eggs, and coffee," she replied. She brought her closer and asked her to feel the carrots. She did, and she noted that they were soft. She then asked her to take an egg and break it. After pulling off the shell, she observed the hard-boiled egg. Finally, she asked her to sip the coffee. The daughter smiled and she tasted its rich aroma. The daughter then asked, "What's the point?" The mother explained that each of these objects had faced the same adversity, the boiling water, but each of them reacted differently. The carrot went in strong and hard and unrelenting. However, after being subjected to the boiling water, it softened and became weak. The egg had been fragile. Its thin outer shell had protected its liquid inside. But after being through the boiling water, its inside became hardened. The ground coffee beans were unique. After they were in the boiling water, they actually changed the water. "Which are you?" she asked her daughter. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? Think of this, which am I? Am I a carrot that seems strong, but with pain and adversity, do I wilt and become soft and lose my strength? Am I the egg that starts with a malleable heart, but changes with the heat? Did I have a fluid spirit, but after death, a breakup, a financial hardship, or some other trial, did I become hardened and stiff? Does my shell look the same, but on the inside, am I bitter and tough with a stiff spirit and a hardened heart? Or am I more like a coffee bean? The bean actually changes the hot water, the very circumstance that brings the pain. When the water gets hot, it releases the fragrance and the flavor. If you're like a bean, when things are at their worst, you actually get better and change the situation around you. When the hours are the darkest and the trials are the greatest, do you elevate to another level? How do you handle adversity? So are you a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? Things are never as bad as they seem, and they're never as great either. Maintaining our perspective on things help us overcome adversity, even if we struggle. So when it rains, it pours. Maybe the art of life is to convert tough times to great experiences, that we can choose to either hate the rain or we can learn to dance in it. Let's choose to dance in the rain, or in this case, drink the coffee. So I hope you enjoyed that. And the thing that I love to say to people, when I end these things, is to say that pain in life is inevitable. That's how we get to learn and grow. Suffering is optional. We do that to ourselves. Growth is intentional. You can choose that, right? And so whilst we can't change the things that go on around it, we get to choose how we respond. So please remember that. So I hope tonight's been really helpful for you. Please stay in touch, use those resources, and I wish you really, really well. Good night, everyone.